Good evening, Mr. Lynch. Thank you for being here. Would like to ask you several questions about your career, about your experience in banking sector, and your decision to join the board of Ameriabank. You have worked in finance for more than 30 years. You know the financial systems of the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. And as a professional in your career, I'd like to know your own standards of professionalism.
So first of all, thank you very much for inviting me tonight. I really appreciate it. And it's a great question. So for me, the standards of professionalism are the same whether you're in a developed market or an emerging market, a developing market, because it's all around some basic principles which I believe apply wherever the market is. And those principles encompass transparency, honesty, acting in your client's best interests, acting to the highest degrees of your profession, and always acting consistently like that. And I think if you do that in whatever market you're involved in, your clients will have a good experience, your colleagues will have a good experience, and it's a good chance that the company will have a good outcome as a result.
So how did you decide to join the board of Ameriabank? What personal contribution will you be bringing to Armenia?
So, first of all, it was a privilege to be asked to join the board of Ameriabank. And I think there's probably maybe 3 or 4 things that drove my decision to accept. The first was the incredibly high quality of the shareholder base at Ameriabank. So whether that be the entrepreneurial investors who founded the business, EBRD, ADB, for a relatively small market, there's a huge amount of capability that sits in the shareholder register, and then that's reflected in the board. So I was very, very happy to accept. I think the second thing was when I looked at the quality of the bank, the way it had grown from basically nothing, from a small advisory business to become the market leading bank in the country. That was quite compelling and reflected very, very well in the management team and the shareholders. And it was exciting, and I would like to be part of that continued growth. And then maybe the third thing which was interesting to me was just the importance of the market here in Armenia. It sits in a vital strategic location between East and West, and I've spent my career between Asia and Europe, and to get exposure to a market that literally geographically sits in the middle and economically sits in the middle with such an important strategic position was fascinating.
Your third point actually takes me to my next question. You are familiar with the Asian tigers and the practices they employ. What lessons have you learned that you especially value?
Yeah, look, the Asian tiger economies have obviously been an incredible success story, or the Asian economies in general, since, in the case of Japan and Korea, since the end of the Second World War, and in the case of China and Southeast Asia a little bit more recently. But they are fantastic models where people's life chances have been improved, they've been lifted out of poverty, and they're obviously models that we should look to see what lessons can be learned. I think probably there's 2 or 3 things that have driven those markets that are quite consistent, whether we're talking about China or Southeast Asia. The first, I think, is a belief in the value of education. And when you value education and you prioritize it, you're developing the workforce of the future. And I think those economies have invested heavily in education, and you can see a market like China where they've gone from low-level manufacturing into high-level manufacturing, into services, artificial intelligence. Some of the most sophisticated technology companies in the world are coming from that market within 1 or 2 generations, and that has been driven by a focus on education. I think the second thing is work ethic, where this is a competitive world out there, and no country has a right to prosper versus another country. that right has to be earned. And I think the economies in Asia have shown and demonstrated that there is a work ethic and a benefit and a premium that comes from that work ethic. And then maybe the last thing I would point to would be an entrepreneurialism that has existed. And that entrepreneurialism has actually been separate from a political system. A political system may be democratic, it may be one-party state, but they've allowed, whatever the form of government is, they've allowed the entrepreneurs to prosper and ambition to be rewarded.
So how do you think, can the components you mentioned be practically employed in any other countries, particularly in Armenia, and to what extent?
And frankly, from what I've seen about in Armenia and from what I've learned from conversations, I think a lot of those characteristics exist. I mean, the Armenian diaspora is highly entrepreneurial, very successful. It is ingrained in the culture. Work ethic, valuing education. So there's no reason why those components can't be applied in this context also.
As a financial analyst with 30 years of experience, what do you think are the key factors contributing to success of a financial institution?
So it's obviously another good question, and every financial institution is different, and they have to chart their own paths. But to me, the institutions that are most successful have a combination of things. So they have a combination of that, the discipline and the high integrity and transparency that I talked about at the beginning. They hire good people, which goes to the education point that I mentioned, that they have a culture of working hard, and also that they know where their business is and they put their customers first. And again, something that attracted me to Ameriabank, where you need to contribute value to your customers. You need to understand what you're good at and constantly strive to be better at that. So whether that be corporate lending, which Ameriabank does very well, moving into SME lending and consumer lending, as the bank has done, looking at digital transformation. These are some of the components which I think will make Ameriabank in particular very successful.
Thank you for this interview. Is this your first visit to Armenia?
It is my first visit to Armenia, yeah.
Did you like here?
It has been fantastic, yeah. I managed to get out of the city and see some of the tourist sites, which I enjoyed. The topography was amazing, the mountains, the open space, and the people are so friendly. And it seems to be, and one difference from Asia is when you get to the traffic crossing, people actually stop when you're going to cross a road, which is a pleasant surprise for me. I'm always used to dodging traffic in other countries, but here people are very respectful and very polite, which has been nice.
So thank you for your time. It was very nice hosting you here. We hope this is not your last visit here and hope to see you here again.
Good.